Welcome back, deep divers. You know, you wouldn't be here if you weren't all about going deep, right? Like really getting into the nitty-gritty of complex stuff, and today's no different. We're taking on a big one, philosophy, specifically Huayan Buddhism. And think about
Yeah.
this, we're not just learning about it. We're going to try to think like Huayan philosophers. Put those thinking caps on, folks.
That's right. And to get us started, we're turning to a trusty source, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's a goldmine of reliable information, peer-reviewed, all that good stuff. And their entry on Hawaiian Buddhism, it's pretty much our roadmap for this deep dive.
Exactly. But, this isn't just a history lesson. We're after the juicy philosophical bits, those core concepts that make Hawaiian so fascinating. It's mind-blowing stuff, like the idea that everything's connected, literally everything. One is all and all is one, they say. And get this, the ultimate reality. Not some far-off place, but intertwined with our everyday lives. Wild, right?
Absolutely. And the impact of these ideas, it's not just some historical curiosity either. Hawaiian has had a huge influence on philosophical thought, especially across East Asia. Think about Zen Buddhism or Chan Buddhism, as it's known in Chinese. It owes a lot to Hawaiian. And even Neo-Confucianism, it's got traces of Hawaiian in there too. So by understanding Hawaiian, we're getting a peek into the broader currents of Eastern philosophy.
So listeners, gear up to tackle some pretty fundamental questions about reality, our place in it, the big stuff. We're talking aha moments, those shifts in perspective, and all without getting lost in a sea of jargon. Promise. Okay, let's dive in. What's the big idea, the foundation of Hawaiian's way of seeing things?
Well, it all starts with one is all and all is one. But this, you see, isn't just a feel-good phrase. It's a profound statement about how absolutely everything depends on everything else. There's this great image, this metaphor they use to illustrate it. Indra's net. Picture a vast, infinite net. At every single intersection, there's a jewel. And get this, each jewel perfectly reflects every other jewel in the net. Pretty cool, huh?
Whoa, that's a powerful image. So it's not just that things are connected in some vague way. They're so intertwined that they couldn't exist on their own. Like take one jewel out and everything changes.
Exactly, you got it. And this crazy interconnectedness, it goes hand in hand with how Hawaiian understands emptiness, or sunyata. Now, emptiness can be a tricky word. It's not that things don't exist, but it's about the lack of like a solid, independent existence, no fixed core, no unchanging essence that stands alone. Everything arises and exists only because of its dependence on other things.
So it's emptiness of a separate permanent identity. How does this Hawaiian take on emptiness relate to what we find in other Buddhist schools like Madhyamaka and Yogacara?
Great question. Madhyamaka, the school started by Nagarjuna, it's all about emptiness too. It argues that since everything is caused by something else, nothing has some ultimate intrinsic being of its own. And then there's Yogacara, which says that external stuff, objects, they don't exist independently of the mind. Reality's basically mental. While Hawaiian draws from both of these, its unique thing is emphasizing the positive side of emptiness. It's not just about the absence of inherent existence. It's the very condition that makes this interconnectedness possible. It's the open, fluid nature of reality that allows for this crazy interpenetration, this mutual influence.
I'm starting to see the subtle differences, but they're huge, right? Okay, another concept that always pops up when talking about Buddhism is, nirvana and samsara. We often see them as opposites. How does Hawaiian, looking at it through its philosophical lens, help us see this relationship differently?
This is where Hawaiian gets really interesting. It suggests that samsara, that's the world of illusion, cycle of birth, death, suffering. It's not fundamentally separate from nirvana, that ultimate reality. They're like two sides of the same coin, just experienced or understood in different ways. Fazang, a big name we'll talk more about later, he uses a cool metaphor to explain this. Imagine a golden lion, right? We can focus on its appearance, the shape, the mane, the roar that's like samsara, our everyday experience. But then when we understand its true nature, we see it's all gold. The gold itself that represents nirvana, the unchanging reality, the form of the lion impermanent, but the essence of the gold, it remains constant.
So it's not about escaping our world, but changing how we see it. Recognizing the gold within the lion, so to speak.
Exactly. It's about seeing beyond our limited everyday perceptions to the true nature of reality. And this leads to another interesting thing about Hawaiian, its view on the natural world. Some traditions might say it's illusory, but Hawaiian, it sees inherent worth in the natural world. It's a vital part of this vast interconnected web.
That's a beautiful perspective, and maybe even a much needed one these days. Now, to see how these ideas developed, the Stanford Encyclopedia introduces us to some of the key figures in Hawaiian. Who were these pioneers who shaped this philosophical tradition?
We'll start with Dushin. Now, he didn't call himself the first patriarch, but that's how he's seen. Duxun lived in a time of a lot of change in China, and he was really focused on making Buddhist practice relevant, especially for everyday people, not just monks and monasteries. That practical focus, it shows up in his philosophical ideas.
So his philosophy wasn't just some ivory tower stuff. It was rooted in real life, in making these big ideas applicable.
Right on. His main work, well, what we have of it, bits and pieces preserved in other writings, is the discernments of the Dharmatatu of Avatamsaka. And it wasn't your typical scholarly treatise. It was more about distilling the essence of the Avatamsaka Sutra, that's the central text of Huayan, in a way that could guide meditation and everyday actions.
And what were the key insights, the innovations that came out of that approach?
Two big ones. First, Duxun used the term Li, a Chinese term, to describe ultimate reality. In earlier Indian Buddhism, terms like sunyata, emptiness, or tathata, suchness, they were the go-to terms. But they often pointed to something beyond our understanding. Li, on the other hand, it can mean principle, pattern, reason. It gave ultimate reality this knowable aspect. Not just a void, but something with order, with intelligibility. You can experience it in nirvanic realization.
That's a fascinating shift. So what was his second big idea?
The second biggie was his use of the Chinese term shi. This one refers to all the things, events, phenomena, stuff of our experience. Earlier Indian Buddhism often talked about emptiness versus form, or rupa, which represented the different dharmas, the building blocks of reality. Duxun, though, he basically put everything, the basic dharmas and the things they make up, on equal footing. The streamlined things made the interconnectedness even more obvious.
Interesting. Okay, so with Li and Shi in place, how did Duxun explain how they relate, how ultimate reality and our world fit together?
He called it the mutual non-obstruction between Li and Shi. And he used 5 different relationships to show this: pervasion, manifestation, concealment, identity, distinctness. The most basic, though, is pervasion, the idea that Li and Shi completely interpenetrate. It sounds kind of paradoxical, right? Like being boundless, Shi being finite. But to explain it, he used this great metaphor: water and waves. Each wave, a Shi, limited, is nothing but the water of the whole ocean, the Li. And the ocean is present in every wave. So things might seem separate, but their underlying reality, no boundaries.
The water and waves, I love that. It really helps visualize such an abstract concept. What about his third key point, the one about total pervasion and accommodation? How did he build on this idea of interconnectedness?
Right, that one focuses on the relationships among individual Shi. Duxun argued that because each Shi is rooted in Li, it's got the potential for all other Shi within it. A radical inclusivity, each thing containing and being contained by every other thing. It's like a hologram or a fractal where even the smallest part reflects the whole. Really challenges how we usually see things as separate.
Yeah, blows your mind a bit. Okay, so who came after Duxun in shaping this philosophical tradition?
That would be Xian, known as the second patriarch. He was a devoted student of Duxun, known for knowing tons of Buddhist scriptures and teachings, but all this knowledge, it actually led him to struggle. He was trying to reconcile all these different teachings, figure out how they fit together, how they were relevant.
So he wasn't just blindly accepting, he was wrestling with it all, searching for a coherent understanding.
You got it. He was like, how does this all make sense? And this struggle led to a big contribution, his 5-tiered Panjiao. That's a fancy word for a system of classifying different Buddhist teachings. He ranked them based on how deeply he thought they grasped the truth.
What was he trying to achieve with this system? What philosophical problem was he tackling?
He wanted to bring some order to this vast landscape of Buddhist thought, and also explain why some teachings were considered more profound than others. The lower tiers, like the Abhidharma teachings with those self-natured dharmas, he saw them as less complete. Then the middle tiers, various Mahayana teachings, they acknowledged emptiness, but differed in how they understood its basis. Some he called elementary, others advanced, depending on whether they talked about a pure ground for emptiness, like the Tathagata Garbha idea,
So he created a kind of hierarchy, with some schools offering a more refined view.
Right. He felt some earlier teachings, while valuable, didn't fully account for both enlightenment and ignorance. He believed the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Huayan interpretation, gave a more complete explanation.
And where did the Avatamsaka teachings fit in his 5 tiers?
Right at the top. Jian saw it as revealing a direct vision of ultimate reality, going beyond all contradictions and dualities. He called this the Dharma realm of dependent arising, different from the earlier dependent origination concept. Within this ultimate teaching, he distinguished sudden and round teachings. The round teaching about directly experiencing nirvana as a result of this vision that was the highest.
And to explain this profound vision, he came up with the 10 mysteries. That sounds like getting to the heart of Huayan.
Exactly. The 10 mysteries of the one vehicle of Huayan, they were his way of explaining different facets of the Avatamsaka's view of reality, especially the interconnectedness of Shi, the phenomena, which often seems paradoxical. They're not a direct match for Dushan's ideas, but they build on those core concepts.
Can you give us an example of how these mysteries shed light on the interconnectedness of Shi in a surprising way?
Sure, take the mystery about how in one Shi is the entirety of all shit. Think about a flower. Normally we see it as a separate thing, right? But, according to this mystery, that one flower contains the potential, the imprint of everything, the soil, sunlight, rain, even the air. And in turn, its existence affects all those things. It's a wild idea that blurs those lines of individuality and emphasizes this all-encompassing interconnectedness.
It really changes how you see even the simplest things. Jian definitely laid some important groundwork for Huayan.
No doubt. And his most famous student, Fazang, the third patriarch, he really built on this foundation. Fazang's probably the most influential figure in Huayan.
Fazan's name is synonymous with Huayan. What did he do to solidify Huayan as a distinct school of thought?
Well, Fazang didn't just elaborate on Jian's teachings, he also got the emperors on board with Huayan. That was huge for its spread and influence. He wrote commentaries on key scriptures like the Avatamsaka Sutra and the Awakening of Faith in Mahayana, and he was known for finding creative ways to make these complex Huayan ideas accessible even to folks who weren't philosophy experts.
We hear about him using visual aids, like a hall of mirrors. That's a cool approach to teaching philosophy.
Right. He also reinterpreted the three-nature theory, an idea from Yogacara, through a Huayan lens.
How did he reshape this Yogacara theory to fit Huayan?
So the original Yogacara theory talked about three aspects of reality: the fully real, the dependently arisen, and the imagined. Fazang, though, he added two aspects to each of these, a fundamental and a derivative. For example, the perfected nature, its fundamental aspect is its pure, unchanging essence, while its derivative aspect is how it manifests in the world. This allowed him to bridge the gaps between Yogacara and Madhyamaka and really explain Huayan's take on emptiness and form.
So it was about integrating different philosophical perspectives within Huayan.
You got it. Fazang's interpretation emphasized how things appear to those who are still under the sway of delusion. That's what he called the other-dependent nature of reality. This laid the groundwork for his theories about how an enlightened mind sees reality. This led to his two analyses, one about dharmas as manifestations of the one mind, and the other about dharmas as causes, all interconnected.
One mind. What did he mean by that, and how does it relate to the Huayan understanding of reality?
In his commentary on the Awakening of Faith in Mahayana, Fazang says the one mind is basically the Tathagatagarbha, the potential for Buddhahood in all beings. But for him, it's not just individual consciousness, separate from the physical world. It's the source of all existence, the underlying reality before things arise. And yet it's also part of the Dharma realm of dependent arising.
And this one mind has two aspects that explain our experience of both the absolute and the relative, right?
Precisely. He calls them the suchness mind and the samsara mind. The suchness mind is free from all thought, it doesn't arise or cease, and it sees beyond all distinctions. But it's not nothingness. The samsara mind, though, it arises and ceases based on conditions. It's the mind that experiences purity and impurity. Fazang connects this to suchness, the true, unchanging reality, and ignorance, the root of suffering. Both suchness and ignorance, for him, have unchanging and changing aspects, empty and functioning aspects, and these correspond to the two aspects of the one mind.
That's a really clever way to bridge the gap between that ultimate reality and our fluctuating experience. And then there's his analysis of dharmas. What was he exploring there?
Yes. That one's a bit more technical. It involved 8 theses about dharmas as causes. 4 of them looked at how individual dharmas relate to each other, how they include and are included in each other, how their identities are mutually determined. The other 4 were about how each dharma relates to the whole dharma realm in the same way.
And what were the main principles behind these theses?
2 core ideas. First, each dharma exists and is empty at the same time. It exists as a distinct thing, but it doesn't have a separate self-sustaining nature. Second, Each dharma has power and lacks power simultaneously. It can influence others and be influenced, but it's all happening within the larger web of dependent arising, not under its own control. This was the basis for his arguments about the mutual inclusion and identity of all dharmas.
And to make this clearer, he used that metaphor of a framed building. Can you walk us through that?
Of course, in the framed building metaphor, Fazang talked about 6 characteristics of dharmas: wholeness, particularity, identity, difference, integration, and disintegration. Imagine a building, right? Lots of beams and rafters. The wholeness is the whole structure. Particularity is each rafter being a separate piece. Identity, they're all part of the building. Difference, each has its own place and function. Integration, they work together to hold up the roof. And disintegration, if you take one out, the whole thing is affected. It helps us see how each dharma is part of this interconnected whole, distinct, yet completely intertwined.
So concrete, such a great way to get these abstract ideas.
Hmm.
Did Fazang also develop his own Panjiao system, like his teacher?
Yes, he did. His book, The Treatise on the Five Teachings of Huayan, basically lays out his Panjiao system, building on Jian's work. He put his own round teaching at the very top, seeing it as the most complete understanding. He argued it went beyond the limitations of earlier schools, like the Abhidharma, the Mahayana teachings, even the Sudden teaching. For Fazang, only the round teaching encompassed all 3 natures of reality and truly grasped this other dependent nature of existence.
Fazang really comes across as a giant in Hawaiian philosophy. Now, there's also Li Tongxuan, not a patriarch, but a unique and influential figure. What made his approach different?
Li Tongxuan was interesting. He lived around the same time as Fazang, but chose a more reclusive life. He wasn't super famous during his life, but his ideas, especially about the Abhidhamsaka Sutra, they had a big impact later on, particularly in Korea and Japan and on Chan Buddhism. His big idea was the one true Dharma realm.
What's that all about? What were the philosophical implications?
The one true Dharma realm, the idea is that every place, every object in the cosmos is true, just as it is. No difference between sacred and secular, enlightenment and delusion, a Buddha and an ordinary person. This naturally led to a more direct path to enlightenment, since the potential for awakening is already there in everything.
That's a radical idea, turning those traditional hierarchies upside down. How did he back up this view?
He had a very unique way of understanding time and existence. He said reality isn't just changing constantly, it's also complete in every moment. Past, present, future, they're not separate, but coexist. This non-temporal view, he thought, solved a lot of problems with how we usually see cause and effect. Linear causality, he felt, led to inconsistencies. Simultaneity was the answer.
So for Li Tongxuan, enlightenment isn't about becoming something different, but about understanding this non-temporal interconnected reality.
Exactly. Ignorance, for him, was just a form of confusion about this truth. Since everything's intertwined, the potential for awakening is always there, like a seed ready to sprout. He used stories from the Lotus Sutra and the Abhidhamsaka Sutra, interpreted them through this lens to show that instantaneous awakening is possible. He even brought in ideas from Chinese classics, like the Book of Changes, to explain his Buddhist views.
Li Tongxuan's take on Huayan sounds really unique, maybe more accessible. So who comes after Fazang in the traditional lineage?
That would be Chengguan, the 4th patriarch. He lived during the Tang dynasty when there was this blossoming of culture and intellectual activity. And he was known for studying a lot of different stuff: Buddhist traditions, Chinese classics, even Indian Vedic texts.
A true Renaissance man. What were his contributions to Huayan?
He's known for his theory of the fourfold Dharma realm. He said there are 4 ways to understand the Dharma realm: the Dharma realm of Shi, phenomena; the Dharma realm of Li, principle; the Dharma realm of non-obstruction between Li and Shi; and the Dharma realm of non-obstruction among Shi. The last 2, they're directly from Dushun's work.
So he was building on Dushun's ideas, providing a more structured framework.
Precisely. He agreed with Dushun but added some philosophical reasoning. He argued that the non-obstruction of Li and Shi is the basis for the non-obstruction among Shi. Basically, you need to deeply understand Li to understand how she can be both identical with and inclusive of each other.
And he was involved in bridging Huayan and Chan Buddhism, right?
Oh, absolutely. Chengguan helped integrate Chan, Zen teachings into Huayan. Earlier, Fazang's student Huayan had some concerns about including the Sudden teaching, which is similar to Chan's emphasis on direct experience in Fazang's Panjiao. Chengguan, to defend Fazang's inclusivity, developed his own Panjiao system where he specifically linked the Sudden teaching to Chan lineages. He emphasized the direct transmission of the mind Buddha identity as a key characteristic of Chan, finding a place for it within Huayan.
He is creating a more unified picture of Buddhism in China? Did he also engage with other philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism?
He did. Changguan actually criticized Confucian and Taoist teachings, especially their understanding of causality and consciousness. He thought they sometimes promoted a kind of pseudo-causality that downplayed moral responsibility and the importance of cultivating wisdom. He specifically criticized texts like the Book of Changes and the Tao Te Ching for putting the ultimate source of things in impersonal forces like qi and the Tao, and he disagreed with the Zhuangzi's focus on spontaneity over disciplined practice.
So he was drawing some lines, showing what he thought made Huayan unique. And finally, we have Gifeng Zongmi, the fifth patriarch. What were his big ideas?
Zongyi, he had a diverse intellectual background. He started with Confucian classics and Buddhist scriptures, then practiced Chan Buddhism, and finally studied Huayan with Chengguan. His biggest innovation was his Panjiao system, which he explained in his book Inquiry into the Origin of Humanity. What's really unique is that he included Taoism and Confucianism in his Buddhist framework.
Wow, that's a big change. What was his reasoning for including them?
Zongmi saw wisdom and ethical value in the teachings of Kangxi, Confucius, and Laozi. He considered them great sages who contributed to social harmony, but he disagreed with their idea that humanity and everything else originated from this same unconscious vital force, Grandma. He said that a canon couldn't explain consciousness in humans without also saying plants and rocks have consciousness. He also challenged their view of heaven, Kaman, as an impersonal moral force, asking why a just heaven would allow good people to suffer and bad people to prosper.
And he used Buddhist ideas to address these issues.
Right. He used the Buddhist concept of reincarnation to explain the seemingly unfair distribution of good and bad fortune, saying it's due to karma from past lives. And regarding consciousness, he argued that ultimate reality is mental in nature, and non-consciousness is just a form of delusion. He basically said Buddhism, especially Huayan, provided a more complete and logically consistent explanation than Confucianism and Taoism, while still acknowledging their value.
Zongmi was engaging in a real cross-cultural philosophical dialogue. Now, what about Huayan's influence after these key figures?
While Huayan as a separate school declined after the persecution of Buddhism in the 9th century, its impact on Chinese Buddhism was huge. Its key ideas, its metaphors, its philosophical terms, they became part of other schools, especially Chan Zen Buddhism.
You can definitely see how Huayan's ideas about interconnectedness and non-duality show up in Zen teachings.
For sure. Huayan also influenced the development of Neo-Confucianism in the Song dynasty. Neo-Confucian thinkers took Huayan concepts like Li and the importance of overcoming selfish desires to achieve harmony.
So even though it wasn't a separate school anymore, its ideas lived on. What about its relevance today?
There's been a renewed interest in Huayan in recent decades. Western philosophers are studying its complex ideas, and some are even trying to formalize its concepts using modern logic and math. And movements like the New Confucian Manifesto are promoting a holistic wisdom that aligns with Huayan's inclusive approach.
It's amazing how these ancient ideas are still relevant. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Huayan Buddhism, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that radical vision of interconnectedness, understanding that one is all and all is one, changes how we see ourselves and the world. The idea that our everyday experience and ultimate reality aren't separate challenges are basic assumptions. And this understanding can change how we act, leading to more empathy and compassion.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, engaging with these concepts, really thinking like a Huayan philosopher, can be transformative. It can lead to those aha moments where you see the world and yourself in a new light.
And here's a question to ponder. How might this Huayan understanding of interconnectedness challenge your assumptions about your own identity and your responsibility in the world? Or how could this non-dual view change how you approach everyday life?
Great questions to think about. And if you're intrigued by Huayan, keep exploring. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is a great place to start, and there's a whole world of Huayan thought out there.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.